Great. Thank you so much, Dwight. And thank you everyone coming to this collaborative event between the Psychiatry Interest Group and the Medical Humanities Interest Group. So today, it's my immense privilege to introduce our speaker, Dr. Jerry Brown, joining us all the way from Portugal. Dr. Brown is a founding professor of anthropology at FIU. For 39 years, Dr. Brown taught a course on hallucinogens and culture at FIU from 1975 to 2014. While college courses on psychedelics have proliferated in recent years, it speaks to Dr. Brown's leadership in the field that his course was the first of its kind in the US when he started it in 1975. This semester, Dr. Brown is teaching an online course at FIU called Psychedelics and Culture. In addition to his teachings here at FIU, Dr. Brown has authored several books on the intersection of psychedelics, religion, and art. While there is no way that we could cover the entire field of psychedelic medicine in a 1-hour talk, today Dr. Brown is going to be talking to us about some of the most exciting research in the field. So with that, Dr. Brown, I'll turn it over to you. The floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kevin and Dwight, for your invitation to speak to the FIU College of Medicine. There's an old saying, man plans, God laughs. And not in my wildest dreams could I have imagined when I started teaching this course on psychedelics and culture in 1975, that I'd still be teaching it nearly 50 years later. And that's really due to the robust psychedelic renaissance that, because of the rigorous research showing the benefit of psychedelics for mental disorders, psychedelics have now moved into the mainstream, are being clinically evaluated. In the case of MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder and psilocybin for depression, they've been fast-tracked by the FDA as breakthrough therapies. Albert Hofmann, who discovered LSD in 1938, witnessing the turmoil and controversy that erupted around it in the 1960s, wrote a book called LSD, My Problem Child. Stanislav Grof, the founder of LSD psychotherapy, looked at this and he said, no, I don't think so. LSD is a child prodigy born into a dysfunctional family. I would add to that the psychedelic renaissance is now providing excellent family therapy to integrate LSD and other psychedelics into the cultural mainstream. And I'm sure the people in this audience will be interested to learn that according to psilocybin alpha, which tracks public psychedelic companies, the major research and development trend in 2022 is to move beyond mental health into neurological disorders, such as brain damage, chronic pain, neurodegenerative diseases, such as Alzheimer's disease. I'm going to speak about 3 studies today as I go to this case study, can psychedelic therapy with guided imagery result in remission of cancer? The first is done by Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in 2016. It's their psilocybin-cancer study, and we'll go into this in depth, conducted on 51 patients, advanced stage cancer patients, looking at the viability of high-dose psilocybin to alleviate anxiety, depression, and also fear of death. We'll also look at the research of Stanislav Grof from 1977, conducted at the Spring Grove Mental Hospital near Baltimore, where he administered high-dose LSD to terminal cancer patients and found an emotional basis for many of the cancers. And the last piece of data I'm going to share with you in our case study for today is what I call it search. And I call it search using the term of Dr. Jim Fadiman, a Harvard-trained psychologist and the world's leading expert on microdosing, taking small subperceptual doses of LSD or psilocybin or other psychoactive compounds to enhance focus, to increase productivity and creativity. You can find Dr. Fadiman's research on www.microdosingpsychedelics.com. And why did he call it search? Because in the early stages of the microdosing trend, there was no rigorous research. And he put online a questionnaire and a protocol so that people around the world could microdose with psilocybin or LSD. 1 day on, 2 days off was the recommended protocol, and then journal and send in through the web their findings. When we're talking about microdosing, we're talking about 5 to 10 micrograms. That's a millionth of a gram, and it's subperceptual. He collected reports related to improvements with brain injury, severe headaches, depression, bipolar disorders, even stuttering, and in one case, after microdosing for a while, someone's shingles went away. A correlation doesn't mean causality, but it was fascinating. Now, what Dr. Fadiman does is he takes these search results and decides with his collaborators which are the most promising and which should be the candidates for more controlled research. I want to pause for a historical flashback right now to Nixon's war on drugs, which was launched in the 1970s with the passing of the Controlled Substances Act, which listed as a Schedule I practically all known psychedelic compounds and means no redeeming use, high addiction potential, and not viable for research with human subjects. John Erlichman, who was one of Nixon's top domestic affairs aide, his top, and also a participant in the Watergate scandal. In fact, Erlichman went to prison for 1.5 years due to being convicted of several counts related to that, gave an interview. Now he was late in life, he had nothing to lose. And he told the Harper magazine interviewer, let me tell you, we knew we were lying about drugs when we characterized it this way. We in the Nixon White House had two problems. We had a civil rights problem, and we had an anti-war movement. And we couldn't make it illegal to protest the war, and we certainly couldn't make it illegal to be Black. But by getting these drugs associated with hippies and African Americans and criminalizing both heavily, disrupting their communities, arrest their leaders, raid their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Now, the impact of this also was that it wiped away, or it kind of put on the back burner all of the research that had been done on psychedelics from the late 40s through the 50s and into the 1960s. Promising research showing benefits of psychedelics for anxiety, depression, alcoholism, criminal recidivism. And all of that got pushed into the background for a long, long time. Fortunately, we're able to talk about a positive outcome today. So this is a little bit of background on the war on drugs. Now, this is the statement that really focused me and my wife, co-author, Julie M. Brown, who is a psychotherapist, onto this area of the conjunction of mystical experience, guided imagery, and psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And based on the psilocybin-cancer research being conducted at NYU under Anthony Boza and at Johns Hopkins under Roland Griffiths, they came to this conclusion. In both trials, the intensity of the mystical experience described by patients correlated with the degree to which their depression and anxiety decreased. Now, let's just pause for a moment and reflect on what is happening here. We have white-coated shamans, researchers, in clinical settings, administering synthetic psilocybin to predictably induce a mystical experience, which it turns out is the key to healing, to the alleviation of anxiety, depression, and fear of death, and unifying science and religion in a way that kind of belies what the philosopher C.P. Snow, who wrote a book on the two cultures, claiming that science and religion would never meet. A little bit about what is this mystical experience that we're talking about. And Johns Hopkins developed a mystical experience questionnaire 30 with 30 questions on it to administer after patients had gone through the psilocybin therapy session to see to what extent, what was the intensity of their mystical experience. The 5 elements were unity and sacredness, a sense of connectedness with at sometimes all living things, all plants and animals, all human beings, a irrepressible positive mood and feeling of deep tranquility and peace. The experience transcends space and time, and there is an authoritative, authentic voice. People claim, they assert that they encountered entities who spoke to them with intelligence and agency. And let me give you an example here. And the last one, as you can imagine, it's ineffable, indescribable. It's very difficult to put in these kinds of experiences completely into words. Let me give you an example. A woman who was riddled with fears and phobias on a high dose LSD session found herself riding on the back of a large, muscular Bengal tiger. They go up through a forest and they come to the edge of a volcanic crater in which the lava is hot and flowing below. She becomes afraid, but the Bengal tiger leaps into the lava. She finds herself unscathed and emerges as a bird and flies away. And after these sessions, her phobia was gone. Now, this is obviously happening as a mystical experience out of time and space. In fact, she tapped into one of the main Jungian archetypes, the phoenix, the symbol of death and rebirth. The psychedelic renaissance really begins in 2006 at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine under the leadership of Roland Griffiths, who at the time he turned his attention to psychedelics was already a distinguished drug researcher, researched the impact of many drugs, an expert on addiction. He had over 300 peer-reviewed articles to his credit. So his credentials were impeccable, and his knowledge of methodology as well. In this research, they showed that you could safely administer psilocybin to healthy subjects in a clinical setting. It improved their mood. It improved their quality of life. And it lasted for up to 14 months. Now, that's the big question here as this psychedelic mental illness research goes forward, is how long are these sessions going to last? That's not known yet. That's the big question. Will 1 or 2 sessions do it forever? Or are there going to have to be a return for booster sessions every X months or years, which would certainly increase the cost and lower the efficacy of these substances? In 2016, the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine conducted this landmark psilocybin-cancer study. It was done on 51 advanced stage cancer patients suffering from a variety of psychiatric disorders, about a third depression, about a third anxiety, and a third a combination of the two. Some of them, about 2/3, were dealing with recurring cancers, another third possible recurrence, and a variety of cancers, as you can see here. The high dose was 22 to 30 milligrams of psilocybin per 70 kilograms of body weight. The control dose, just 1 to 3 milligrams. What they found here was that after these sessions, 1 or 2 sessions, Griffiths reported the following out of this when the research was completed. Over here in the blue columns, this is 6 months out on the high dose of psilocybin. 70% of the participants are saying that it's among the top 5 most meaningful, and also most spiritually significant lifetime experiences. As a scientific phenomena, this was quite astonishing. Griffith said, look, by no means did I think we would find what we have found. And now I want to go to our search study for today. And this is based on the work of my wife, co-author, Julie Brown, who has an MA in counseling psychology, psychotherapist, worked mainly with cancer patients in a private practice in Miami in many years, using the technique of guided imagery. And this is a process in which the psychotherapist has the client relax, close their eyes, and help them focus on eliciting images that can lead to healing and resolution of life's issues. And at times, Julie's clients, well, more than at times, often entered a state of mystical experience. So we have both religious mystics throughout the ages having spontaneous mystical experiences. We have shamans and indigenous people around the world reporting those kinds of things. And now we have laboratory-induced mystical experience and also through guided imagery. This is from the Johns Hopkins protocol, and it shows a client, a patient in a therapy session. This is very much following the protocol of Stanislav Grof, the developer of LSD psychotherapy. The patient is lying back, they're relaxed, eye shades, earbuds for music, and you have two trained and credentialed sitters who are there to give them reassurance, to support them, and as in the jargon of psychedelics, to help hold the space for them. There's a difference between psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy and guided imagery. The Johns Hopkins protocol is non-directive. It says to the patient, trust, let go, and be open, without providing any instructions on where to focus. In contrast, the guided imagery is directive. It tells them to look for the images that might emerge, and it helps the client to process this. For example, if someone had throat cancer, the therapist might say, put your hand over your throat, allow an image to emerge and interact with it. These are the results of two of Julie's clients over a 30-year period. The first was a male, a physician, fourth stage prostate cancer, came to Julie and worked with her for 2 years after conventional cancer treatment. His main guided image was the spiritual self. The mystical experience elements were unity and oneness and authentic self, and anxiety was reduced. He went into full remission as verified by his oncologist. The second, and these are 2 out of 50, a female graduate student, third stage breast cancer, worked with Julie for 1.5 years after conventional treatment. Her main concern was anxiety. She wanted to go off to graduate school, but she was afraid to leave her friends, her support network, her therapist. The image she got was a warrior self, and it experienced mystically was beyond time and space, positive mood. Her anxiety was reduced, and she went off to graduate school, and she achieved full remission as verified by her oncologist. Now, as for me, I never thought I'd be doing anthropological fieldwork in my own house with my wife as the cultural informant, telling me about what was happening in her therapy sessions, where she had an 80% success rate among 50 clients over an almost 30-year period. Unfortunately, we never imagined that this work would become a case study published in a medical journal, which it has been. And so her client notes were discarded 7 years after we left Miami in 2012. I'm going to move through some minor slides. They're not minor, but not central to our argument. The key element here in successful psychotherapy is trust, the trust relationship between the client and the therapist. These are two letters that two of Julie's clients wrote to her because she wanted to approach oncologists to see if they would allow her to work with their cancer patients. The first is from a doctor at Adventura Hospital and Medical Center. He was diagnosed as having inoperable cancer. He was referred to her because he chose to add additional therapeutic regimens to those prescribed by his doctor. And she was recommended to him because of her other success. As of this date, I continue to be in total remission and continue under her care on a regular basis. This is in 1994. The second letter is from the CEO of the North Shore Medical Center, who thanks her, Julie, for her support and adds, "There is no doubt in my mind that your visualization therapy and healing techniques have been instrumental in my miraculous recovery." Now, how does this all work? How does mystical experience heal? For Roland Griffiths, his large take on it was psilocybin enables understanding that all is well in the biggest picture, in the largest frame. Robin Carhart Harris, who pioneered the use of functional MRIs with regular, average, normal subjects, and argued that psychedelics surpasses the brain's default mode network, creating a superhighway to the unconscious. And Stanislav Grof argues that mystical states activate an inner self-healing intelligence. By the way, Dr. Harris, who did his research at Imperial College in London, has now moved on to the University of California at San Francisco to direct their new Neuroscape Center. And I quote, "It's a neuroscience center at UCSF engaged in technology creation and scientific research to better access and optimize brain function in both healthy and impaired individuals." So this is an example of a person before and after magic mushrooms. Psilocybin is the main psychoactive ingredient. As you can see beforehand, there are dozens and dozens, but not a myriad of neural pathways activated. After psilocybin, the brain is crisscrossed with neuroplasticity. New neural pathways are being opened up or traveled upon. And this has led to some interesting theories called capture by Dr. Carhart Harris, where he argues there's a similar phenomena happening in the brain across all mental disorders. And psychedelics helps a person break free of that. This is your brain on LSD, literally. And for those of you old enough to remember Nancy Reagan's old 1980s campaign, Just Say No, in ads, there were two eggs, and the narrator said, "This is your brain," and then "This is your brain on drugs," and he breaks the eggs, and they start frying in the frying pan. Well, this is your brain on LSD, literally. What happens here is that these mystical states activate an inner self-healing intelligence that takes to the surface emotionally charged material from the unconscious, brings it to consciousness for processing. He found these kinds of relationships in his pioneering book, The Human Encounter with Death, high dose LSD to terminal cancer patients, and they saw many instances of negative emotions, severe guilt, self-hatred associated with preceding manifestations of cancer. And even in the LSD sessions, clients related their cancer to these tendencies within themselves. And then Groff also cites Dr. Symingtons, who reviewed 200 articles of scientific literature and found a relationship between emotional factors and malignancy. Now, I think you might be sitting there and thinking, well, This is fascinating, but you might be saying to yourself, Dr. Brown, this is magical thinking. I mean, this is a tautology. Psychedelics and guided imagery induce mystical states. There's some kind of magical self-healing intelligence that arises. Where is the biochemical evidence? Are there any neurological correlates in these mystical states? And in fact, the Faculty of Medicine at Technion in Israel, their conclusion is yes. They studied mouse models of melanoma and lung cancer, and they found that by activating the brain's reward system, they could regulate immune response, enhance immune response, and after 14 days of this protocol, the tumor size was reduced by 46.5%. So the big question I want to ask, and it's a real challenge, can Julie's research inducing mystical states and helping to lead to the remission of cancer be replicated? And can we test the proposition that psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, not only can it help with psychological states, but it could facilitate physiological remission in cancer patients? And you can find all of this in our article on mystical experience with cancer patients published in the Global Journal of Medical Research last year. Now, I want to go on, and I know we're short on time, to some valuable resources in psychedelic medicine. And I understand that this is recorded and the slides will be available, so, but I know you're probably ardent note takers. The first is psilocybinalpha.com. It is a robust directory of 47 public psychedelic companies, and the research, the CEOs, the medical team, the protocols, the clinical research they're working on. The other organization I can recommend to you is the Psychedelic Medicine Association.org. It's a global association of doctors, therapists, mental health professionals, all who want to advance their education on the therapeutic uses of psychedelic medicines and to give practitioners access to the wealth of research being done in this field. They put out an introduction guide to psychedelic medicine. What are the substances that are being researched? What does the landscape look like? What are the legal issues? As I started out at the beginning, I said the big development in psychedelic research is that the R&D is moving beyond mental health and these psychiatric disorders that have been well researched and in clinical trials to neurological disorders. That's the major trend right now, such as autism and attention deficit, such as neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, stroke, chronic pain, severe pain, brain damage, traumatic injury, and migraines, including cluster headaches. This is just, and you can find this on psilocybin alpha, this is just a highlight of some of the research protocols being undertaken by public psychedelic companies that have hired medical teams and medical researchers to conduct these trials. There's about $5 billion in market capitalization. It's like the early.com that have been invested in these companies on the promise that they will come up with cures and helpful medicines that will eventually be legalized. This company is evaluating a psychedelic neuromodulator as a potential treatment for schizophrenia. This one is using its proprietary psilocybin compound in treating cancer. Another is looking to evaluate microdosing for mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. And they've already indicated that this is a promising avenue of research because it either and or reduces the plaque or increases neuroplasticity. And here's an article recently in Frontiers of Psychiatry, anecdotal information about pain sufferers who experience lasting pain reduction while self-medicating. In wrapping up, and I'm sorry I had to move a little quickly today, I want you to think of psychedelics as the mind scope. Think about 1590 when Janssen first invented the microscope, and fast forward hundreds of years to the electron microscope and all that it lets you as doctors do today. And also 1608 when Lippershey invented the telescope, and fast forward hundreds of years to the recent launch of the James Webb Space Telescope that's going to allow us to look hundreds of millions of light years into the galaxy. Well, now we have the mind scope, LSD and other psychedelics, with the LSD invented by chemist Albert Hofmann, or discovered by him in 1938. And I look at all of us involved in the field of psychedelics as medieval cathedral builders, as an analogy. These cathedral builders laid the foundations for cathedrals that they would not see completed in their lifetime, because it could take 100, 200 years to build. And we're like the cathedral builders, laying the foundation for psychedelic medicine, whose full contours won't emerge for decades, if not centuries. And as Groff said, the proper use of psychedelics can do what the microscope did for biology and medicine, or the telescope. A few resources you'll find in these slides. Here are 2 books by MDs on visualization, guided imagery, and healing. Here are 4 main psychedelic medicine resources: the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, the mothership of all psychedelic education and research. And by the way, they're holding their psychedelic science meeting in 2023 in June in Denver. And they anticipate that this year, over 10,000 people will attend. The University of San Francisco's Neuroscape Neuroscience Center, and the Psychedelic Medicine Association. If you want to be in touch with me or follow up, there's my email address. Our website is psychedelicgospels.com, and we post a lot of the recent research on our Facebook page, Psychedelic Gospels. Let me definitely end at this point. Am I still here? Yes, thank goodness. In terms of psychedelic medicine, think of it as rediscovering a new class of drugs that had been banned for half a century, opening up a treasure trove of potential medicines and cures for recalcitrant and even orphan diseases. And in addition to research, there's also a great need for psychedelic education in the medical field. I'm looking at a quote from Dr. Evan Lewis, Director of Neurology Center at Toronto. And to paraphrase it, what he's saying is that he's had patients who's come to them and told them that they were shunned by doctors when they asked them, can you give a known cannabis treatment for my daughter's intractable seizures? And he says that's heartbreaking that the medical personnel were not educated about cannabis. And I worry that we're setting ourselves up to head down this same path with psychedelics. Thank you for attending. Perhaps some of you will see research into psychedelic medicines as a key to a promising and exciting future.